The clip hit our family chat before sunrise. I woke to my mother asking what I meant by telling my bridesmaids that I had a backup groom and saying the name out loud. My husband, Nolan, stood in the doorway, tie still around his neck from the night, and said, "So your backup plan heard you?" I said, "It was a joke." He did not answer. He picked up his jacket and his car key. But it didn't start like that. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Bryn Larkin, 33, HR assistant at Ames Tool and Supply. I schedule interviews, chase forms, and put cupcakes in the break room for birthdays no one remembers until the sugar hits. I am the quiet person who tells people to sign line 3, not line 4, and smiles even when they point their pens at me like little swords. Nolan Drexler is 35, an electrician with a steady hand. He likes systems, not moods. He tells wires what to do, and they obey. We met at a church cleanup day. He fixed a light. I labeled storage bins. He said, "You're good with tape." I said, "I am very good at holding things together." He laughed and said, "Then you are perfect for me." We dated 2 years. Simple dates, diner breakfasts, Sunday walks by the water plant where the smell is a test, not a feature. He took me to meet his mother, Vivian, a woman who makes lists for pleasure. My mother, Paula, cried at our engagement dinner and told Nolan, "She is a good girl, just impulsive." He said, "I like her spark." Everyone smiled like it was a blessing and not a warning. I liked that he said spark, not fire. Spark sounds pretty, fire needs a plan. We planned a small wedding at the community hall because we prefer the money in the bank. My sister Maren helped with flowers. My father, Gordon, negotiated on chairs like he was buying a car. My boss, Don, told me to take 1 day off after and said, "It is busy season." I said, "I will answer email." I always answer email. It makes me feel safe. Nolan likes rules. He also likes when I break them for fun. That is the problem. He says, "You make life interesting." I say, "Someone has to." He tells me I am funny. I tell him I am not trying to be, but I am. It is my reflex. If a room is quiet, I drop a line and wait for the little thunder. I learned that at 14, when silence in our house meant my parents were tearing paper quietly in another room and pretending not to fight. The rehook came 1 week before the wedding. My ex-coworker, Cole, sent a text to the old office chat. "Remember Bryn's thing for jokey ultimatums?" He attached a clip from my birthday last year where I said, on a patio, that if Nolan ever got boring, I would just swap him with a guy who knows how to dance. It was dumb. We were drunk on cheap sangria. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I showed Nolan the clip then and said, "I do not mean it." He said, "I know." He was kind. He assumed I was a comedian in a short room. He trusted me. The night before the wedding, the bridesmaids took me to a small rented room above a bar. I made jokes about the chairs and the glitter. I liked the feeling of all eyes. Nolan sent a picture of his cufflinks and said, "See you at the end of the aisle." I sent 3 heart emojis in a line. "If you trip, I'm replacing you with Trent." That was a name from high school, a laugh line with dust on it. I did not speak to Trent anymore. It was just a name like a prop. I wrote it, then I wrote, "Kidding." Everyone sent laughing faces. It felt harmless. On the wedding night, after the music and the cake, after Vivian's toast about steady love, and after my father's long story about me losing my shoe in 3rd grade, I stood in the bridal suite with my sister and 2 bridesmaids, Lila and Nora. The photographer had left. The DJ's last box was rolling down the hall. I was too wired to stop. I grew up in rooms where you had to fill air with sound, or a storm would appear. So I filled it. Lila asked if I felt married. I said, "I feel like the same girl with better jewelry." Nora said Nolan looked like he might cry at the vows. I said, if he dropped the ring, I would have called Plan B. I told him that too. We all laughed because they know me. Jokes on my handrail. The makeup artist came back in to collect a forgotten brush, and I let my mouth run. I said, he is perfect, but if he ever goes stale, I have a list. Marin said, you'll scare people. I said, fear keeps them sweet. It was a bad sentence, but it felt smart then. I had a ribbon in my hair and a little glitter on my collarbone, and a cruel confidence that comes with being the center for one 8-hour shift. I listed fake names. I said, maybe Cole, maybe Drew, maybe that tall usher who actually speaks Spanish. I told Nolan on the honeymoon I'd do a trade-in if he gets cheap. I was joking. I was cruel. It can be both true. Nora had her phone out because she was recording everything all night for a day in the life video. She loves to edit clips with tiny text that makes people cry. I saw the red light and posed and said louder, if he flops, I replace him. Marin said, stop. I said, I'm fun. I pointed at the camera and added a name from a long-ago list, Grant. It was a sound that fit the joke. It was also the name of Nolan's friend from work, a quiet guy with a nicer truck and a kind laugh. That made the line land like a slap hidden inside a tickle. We laughed. We moved on to shoes. The red light stayed on. I did not know Nolan was outside the door, retrieving the envelope, with the final check for the DJ. I did not know his friend Grant walked with him and heard his own name in my mouth. I did not know the makeup artist Odette handed Nora her brush and asked if she could airdrop the video, because it was so funny. I did not know Nora sent it to our group thread by mistake, not the private album. People replied. Little hearts bloomed on the wrong screen. We left for the hotel. Nolan was quiet in the elevator. I thought he was tired. In the room, he untied his shoes slow. He said, did you tell them you have a list? I said, it's a bit. He said, did you use Grant's name? I said, it came out. He was there. It made sense to say someone real. Nolan looked at me like you look at a wire you thought you had turned off. He said, I heard. I froze, then signed my own permission slip to keep performing. I said, if you can't handle a joke, I cannot protect you from life. He sat on the edge of the bed and did not look up. He said, I hope you enjoyed that laugh. I said, you're being dramatic. He stood, put on his jacket and said, I will sleep at home. You stay here with your crew. We will talk in the morning. I said, so you are going to leave your bride alone because of a line? He said, you left your husband alone in a room full of people with that line. He picked up his key card and walked out. I stared at the door for 10 breaths and then told myself to win the night back. I messaged the bridesmaids, party up here. I drank 2 small bottles of hotel wine and told myself I was brave for not crying. At 7, my phone pinged. A clip from the group chat, our aunts and cousins and church friends. It was my sentence, with captions, because Nora always adds captions. It said, if he flops, I replace him. Grant is first. The comments were a storm. My mother wrote, is this a joke? Vivian wrote nothing, which was worse. Grant wrote in a private text. Nolan asked if I heard. I'm sorry, Bryn. I wish you didn't say that. I had to sit on the bathroom floor so I did not faint from sudden shame. Then I stood up and told myself I could still run this if I kept the frame. I sent a message to the family chat. It was a joke. Relax. My father called and said, come home now. I said, we are at a hotel. He said, your husband is not. I checked out. In the lobby, a woman from our church, Clara, stopped me by the coffee bar and said, I saw a video. I hope it is not true. I told her it was a joke. She said, people believe what we repeat. She smiled like a nurse. When I reached the house, Nolan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, making eggs like he was fixing a breaker. He said, we will meet both families at 2. I will not yell. I said, you cannot schedule a feeling. He said, I can schedule a meeting. He placed eggs on a plate I did not want. He said, "You will eat. You are shaky." I sat and ate because I am always the one who eats when told. At 2, our parents and siblings sat in our living room, like a jury, trying not to look like a jury. My mother cried. Vivian folded her arms. Gordon asked for the facts, like this was a car report. Nolan said, "Bryn made a joke that named my friend as her replacement. She did this on our wedding night. Many people heard." He kept his face calm. I felt the room tilt. I said, "It was comic relief." Vivian said, "It was a rehearsal." She has a razor voice that does not need to rise. I said, "You never liked me." She said, "I loved you for my son." Nolan put a hand up and said, "Stop." He looked at me and said, "You can fix this by owning it." I said, "I owned it. I said it was a joke." He shook his head like a tiny, tired no. Cliffhanger 1 arrived when my Aunt Ruth forwarded the clip to the church Facebook group for prayer. The comments lit like tinder. We sat at the dining table like it was a hearing. Nolan held a little notepad because he believes in writing things down before saying them. He said, "We have options. We can ask for the video to be deleted. We can post a joint statement. We can take a break." I said, "We just got married." He said, "We may be allowed to ask for an annulment if we both agree." My mother gasped like the word was a cold hand on her neck. Gordon said, "Let's slow down." Vivian said, "He's not safe in a marriage where she plays with his face like that." I hated that image and loved it because it made me sound powerful. I said, "It was one line." Nolan said, "It was a map." I laughed, which was cruel because sometimes I laugh when I should fold. I said, "You are making me the villain for doing what everyone does. Tease." He said, "You named my friend. You told our room you could trade me in." Marin whispered, "Bryn, say sorry." I said, "I am sorry your feelings are weak." It exploded then. Vivian stood and said we needed a pause. Gordon said we could go outside and breathe. Nolan stayed still. He said, "I will move into Grant's guest room tonight." The word Grant floated over the table like a bee. Around that 3,200th moment, the first unexpected ally turned. Grant texted me privately. I talked with Nolan. I told him to stay. I said it was a joke. I felt a wet relief and typed, "Thank you." He responded. He said hearing my name hurt more than anything. He asked if I ever flirted with you. I said no. He believed me. Then, like a second wave, he wrote, "Please don't contact me anymore for his sake." It was a kindness wrapped in a lock. That night, Vivian told the neighbors she had a headache and could not stop by the barbecue. She did not say why. The next morning, she called my mother and said, "We will not hide this. That makes it rot." Between those two calls, the story grew legs. A cousin sent me a photo of a napkin from the reception with my scribble on it, a pretend replacement list from when we were doing jokes at the dessert table. I had written 4 names and drawn stars. Someone had kept it like a souvenir and then posted it as if it were a plan. Lila said she thought it was funny when I wrote it. I told her to delete it. She said, "Everyone already saw." The tribunal resumed on Wednesday at Vivian's house. She poured tea like a judge gives water to the accused. She said, "Explain why you used his friend's name." I gave my clean speech. I said I was nervous on the wedding night. I fill silence with jokes, and I was trying to keep the mood light. She said, "You cut him to keep everyone laughing." I said, "He can take a cut." Nolan said, "I am not a rope for your knife practice." He looked so tired I almost stopped. Almost. At that moment, a recorded voicemail surfaced. Gordon pressed play on his phone, and we all heard me, 2 nights before the wedding, leaving a message on Marin's phone after too many rehearsal dinner drinks. I said, with the bright, mean voice I hate, that if Nolan ever let himself go, I would upgrade. I said, "That's the word, upgrade." The room went quiet as a closed mouth. Marin whispered, "I forgot about that." Vivian did not whisper. She did not. I wanted a hole in the floor. I got a chair that felt too hard. By Friday, I had come up with a plan. We would post a couple photo with a caption about inside jokes that escaped. We would say we were private people and ask for grace. I wrote the caption. Nolan read it and said, "This is PR, not apology." I said, "Both work." He said, "Only one heals." He set his notepad down and said, "I am going to make an appointment with Pastor Doug." He meant counseling. I said, "You want to bring church into this?" He said, "We brought church into this when we did vows in front of them." He left to make the call. I stared at the closed door and told myself he would calm down. That was how I kept my own world soft. I told myself everyone else bends. What my mother-in-law told the neighbors. Vivian brought muffins to Irene next door and said she needed prayers for a situation where words were used as tools. She did not name me, but Irene said she understood. She told Vivian she had heard a clip. Vivian said she would never shame me, but she hoped I understood that public words are a public bridge that can burn. Irene later told my mother that Vivian spoke with calm sadness, not anger. That tone made people side with her. What my boss hinted during lunch. Don took me to the sandwich place and said I looked thin, which is a lie I like. Then he said, "Your situation is making the office chat lively." He asked if I needed a day. I said no. He said, "HR cannot be the headline." He smiled so it sounded like care. He told me to avoid posting for a while. He did not say wedding night joke, but his eyes did. He also told me that Grant's company had removed our work order from his queue for now, to avoid awkwardness. That was Nolan's circle closing a door with soft hands. What my sister texted me that night. Maren wrote at 11. Nolan packed a bag. She said he was staying at Grant's, but in the den, not the guest room, like they were making a point that even couches have rules. She said Vivian was cleaning his room at home like it was a shrine. She said I should apologize in a way that hurts me. I told her I am not a martyr. She wrote, "You are not a clown either, but you are acting like one." I put my phone face down for an hour and then looked again. No new messages. What Pastor Doug said in his office. He did not take sides. He said, "Words speak futures." I said I was just talking. He said, "You chose the knife that fits the softest place." He told me to write 5 sentences I could say to Nolan without the word joke. I wrote, "I am sorry. I hurt you. I will not do that again. Your friend's name was a wrong choice. I understand that trust is a wall." He read them and said, "Good. Now, do you believe them?" I said, "I believe I did not mean harm." He sighed. What the church women said in their thread. Lisbeth told Ruth that she felt bad for me because I was a child of noise and learned to make it before it made me. Ruth said, "She is not a child." They decided to bring me a casserole anyway. They brought it in a dish I was supposed to return. It felt like a loan of patience with a due date. Back at work, the free fall began in neat steps. Denise, our receptionist, looked at me with widened eyes and said, "I think your wedding joke reached the vendors." I said, "How?" She said, "Someone forwarded it with your name." In the break room, Clara asked if I had seen the church page. I said no. She said, "People love a gentle scandal." At lunch, Don asked me to move the open interviews to next week because Nolan had been scheduled to fix lights in the conference room, and we want to avoid the rumor mix. He smiled like a doctor telling a patient to avoid salt. The mother of one of our junior employees, who knows my mother, called to ask if she should send her daughter to work there because the HR lady seemed chaotic. Don told me about it and said, "See, this is why we keep things quiet." I said, "I did not leak it." He said, "You created it." At 3,100 characters into that day, a neighbor's comment pushed me. Irene met me at the mailbox and said, "Nolan came by to fix my porch light. He looked thin." I said, "He is fine." She said, He did not talk much. I wanted to say he never talks much. I said nothing and went back inside. My friends started to split. Lila wrote, "You are still funny, even now." That made me feel both seen and reduced. Nora disappeared from my messages. She did not apologize for the clip. She turned off her read receipts and became a ghost with a ring light. Marin was a pendulum. 1 minute she told me to own it, the next she told me to run to him and cry on the porch until he opened the door. I asked if that would work. She said, "It only works in movies." I asked if he talked to her. She said, "He said he is tired." Cliffhanger 2 lined up as a public confrontation. Vivian texted, "Gordon's birthday dinner next Friday at the diner. Everyone will be there. Nolan wants to speak." My heart thumped in one hard piece. She added, "It will be calm. He asked the pastor to come." I replied, "He wants to make a show." She answered, "He wants to end a show." I told myself I could handle it. I like rooms. I like microphones, even when there is only a fork on a glass. I decided to post first to shape it. I wrote a long note on my page about the thin line between humor and harm. I used words like growth and learning. People commented with hearts and the word brave. Then Ruth posted an old clip of me at a work picnic, saying I would replace any boss who bored me. It was supposed to be nothing. It now looked like a pattern. I deleted my note overnight. Ames Tool and Supply called a staff meeting. Don said, "We keep our drama outside the building." He did not look at me, which is a way of looking. After the meeting, he asked if I could train a temp to cover front desk for a few weeks while I worked behind the scenes. I said, "Is this a demotion?" He said, "It is a shield." Shields still mean arrows are flying. That week, Nolan stopped sending me morning texts. The last one he sent on Wednesday said, "I will be at Gordon's by 6 on Friday." I wrote back, "I will be there." He did not reply. I called him twice. He let it ring. I drove past Grant's after work and saw Nolan's truck. I told myself to keep going. I turned around and parked down the block and sat there like a person who does not respect her own rules. A kid on a bike stared at me like I was a statue of a mistake. I drove home. I tried counter-moves. I am not patient by nature. I am a planner for other people's plans. First, I sent Nolan a photo of the vow card he had written me, the one where he called me his brave girl. I wrote, "Still me." He did not answer. Next, I called the bank and asked about moving our joint account to my name only for ease. The teller, Lydia, said, "Both signatures are needed." She also said Nolan had already set alerts on withdrawals. He expected my move before I made it. I felt both known and caged. Then I tried the social play. I posted a picture of our wedding cake stand with a caption about how sugar melts, but love does not. It was bad. I knew it. I left it. An hour later, Grant's sister, Adrienne, commented, "Please take my brother out of your mouth." I deleted the comment. She messaged me, "Do not delete me, face it." I blocked her. My circle shrank. Next, I tried to control the church narrative. I asked Pastor Doug if I could speak at the potluck. He said, "This is not a stage." He proposed a small meeting instead. I said no, I wanted the room. He said, "Rooms have echoes." He told me to write a letter to Nolan instead and put it under his door at Grant's. I drove there at 9 and stood on the sidewalk with the letter and realized I did not know which door was theirs because I always entered with Nolan and never paid attention. That felt like a metaphor, and I hate metaphors unless they clap for me. I texted Nolan, "I am outside with a letter." He replied after 10 minutes, "Do not leave anything. Go home." I left the letter anyway. He sent a second text, "I asked you not to." He added, "This is what you do. You win the room and lose the person." I wanted to send a paragraph back. I put my phone under my leg and drove away in silence for once. It made my chest hurt. The part of me that is not clean reached out to one of Nolan's friends, Seth, who flirts with everyone. I had never used him because it would have been messy. I sent a casual thing. You looked sharp at the wedding. He wrote back, "Thanks." Then he added, "Please don't." That stung in a new way. Being told I was predictable in my worst move. I blocked him too. The night before the diner, Vivian called and said, "We will be kind. You must be quiet while Nolan speaks." I said, "I will not be silent in my own life." She said, "Then you will watch people walk out." I hung up. I called Marin and said, "I will not be made into a show." She said, "You already made yourself a show. Try being a person now." I snapped, "You always take his side." She said, "I take the side that keeps us from setting our house on fire." I told her goodnight like a slam. The diner smelled like coffee and fryer oil, comfort for people who want to pretend life is a sandwich. Our families filled the back room. Pastor Doug stood by the pie case. Vivian sat rigid, hands folded. Gordon, birthday man, wore a paper crown that made the whole scene look like a sad play. Nolan walked in 5 minutes late, not from rudeness, from timing. He always knows the second when a thing will land. He raised his glass and started reading. He said he had written a statement because he wanted to be careful. He said, "I married Bryn last week because I believed in her kind heart and quick mind." He said, "She made a joke on our wedding night that cut me." He did not repeat my line. He did not say Grant's name. He did not make me small by making me famous. He said, "I will not fight online. I will not argue in your kitchens. I will say this, I value vows." He folded the paper. He looked at our parents. He said, "We will separate with calm." Then he did the clean move. He pulled out a second paper and said, "Annulment is not possible for our situation, but I filed for a divorce that is simple and fair." He slid the copy to Gordon and Paula, another to Vivian. He said, "No contests, no debts to fight over. The house goes to Bryn if she can refinance by November. I will pay half the mortgage until then. We will divide the savings today with witnesses." He placed a check on the table next to the salt. It felt like a small headstone for a week-long marriage. He continued. He said, "I will not attend any event where my friend is shamed. No one will push him out of our circle for a line he did not ask for." He looked at Grant, who stood by the wall. Grant nodded, small and red. Nolan said to me, "Do not contact Grant." He said it plain, not as a threat, as a boundary. The meltdown was mine, not his. I stood up. I said, "You are performing." He said, "I am clarifying." I said, "You are choosing pride over forgiveness." He said, "You are choosing applause over respect." The room was a held breath. Vivian said, "Let him finish." I said, "I am not a child." Pastor Doug put up a hand like he could stop the weather. Nolan went on. "There is one more note." He reached into his folder and took out a small card. He said, "This is an invitation." He held it up. At the top was a date 6 months from now and a location, a garden by the river. Our eyes moved slow to the names. It said, Nolan Drexler and Elise Halloran. I knew Elise from somewhere. It hit me in a second. Elise runs the training program at the technical college where Nolan volunteers. She is tidy and calm. We met once at a fundraiser. She had clear eyes and a firm handshake. He said, "I wanted to tell you before you saw it somewhere else. We are engaged. We will marry next spring." He looked at me, not cruel, just finished. He added, "I wish you peace." The room was ice and hot at once. Gordon stood up, then sat. Paula whispered, "How?" I said, "This is a stunt." Nolan said, "We have been talking since months before the wedding as colleagues about community classes. We started talking as people last week after the joke. We will keep caring for each other with respect and without hurry." He looked at Vivian. She nodded, eyes shining. Grant put his hands in his pockets like he wanted to hide his fingers. I said, "So you replaced me in a week?" He said, "I chose not to be replaced." He set the invitation on the table near my water. He said, "I am not asking you to bless it. I am telling you the future is moving. People started talking then, small bursts like popcorn. Ruth said, "He did not cheat." Maren said, "Bryn, sit." I stayed standing because sitting felt like folding. After the diner, Nolan drove to the house with his crew. Vivian, Pastor Doug, and Grant. They were not an army, they were an accounting team. He walked in calm. He said, "Keys?" I put them on the counter. He said, "Ring?" I set it down next to the keys. He opened a box and put documents on the table like placemats. The divorce filing, the refinancing schedule, the number for Lydia at the bank, the list of utilities to switch. He said, "I will come on Tuesday for my tools. You do not have to be here. Pastor Doug will meet me." He turned to my mother and father and said, "Please help her with the forms." He turned to me and said, "Do not call me tonight. Do not text me. We need clean air." I said, "You are cold." He said, "I am careful." I said, "You are getting married already." He said, "I am moving forward. You may too. You will find someone who loves your spark and asks you not to make fires with it." He closed the box, picked up the keys he needed and put them in his pocket. He walked to the door, stopped and said to Gordon, "Thank you for trusting me with your daughter when I did not see this coming." Gordon said, "I still trust you to be decent." Nolan nodded. He looked at me once, not unkind, not soft. He left. The door clicked in that light way that hurts more than a slam. I stood in the quiet. Marin touched my arm and said, "Say sorry for real. Not for what it looked like, for what it was." I said, "It was a joke." She shook her head. She said, "Then live with it being the punchline." Vivian hugged my mother and left a casserole on the counter, like a peace treaty with an expiration date. Pastor Doug prayed by the sink without making a show. Grant put a folded paper by the fruit bowl, a note that said he wished me well and asked me to please block his number for a while. I swallowed the urge to text him right then, to demand comfort. I stood still, which felt like a brand new skill. When I was 19, I dated a boy named Mason who got quiet when he was sad. I did not know how to enter quiet. One night at a bonfire, he said, "I need space." I could not stand the pause. I stood on a picnic table and told everyone a story about how he cried at a dog movie. They laughed. He looked small. After he said, "You could have just sat next to me." I did not have that tool. Jokes were my screwdriver for every screw. That memory came back when Nolan walked out of the hotel room. I told myself I would choose silence this time. Then I spoke anyway because silence does not applaud. Lila told Nora that Vivian was kind at the grocery store and said she hoped I ate. Nora told Adrian that I deleted her comment, and that meant I was still playing PR, not being sorry. Adrian told Grant that she blocked me, and he should do the same. Grant told Nolan that I'd messaged Seth. Nolan told Pastor Doug that he needed hard boundaries. Pastor Doug told Ruth that he was sad for us both and asked her to stop posting clips. Ruth told Clara she would not because the truth heals. Clara told Don that church people are bored and this is a show. Don told our office that social media is dangerous. I told myself that if enough people talked, the story might flatten and I would walk over it like a rug. He mailed back the photo strip from our first date with a note that said he would keep the other copy because it still meant a good night to him. I put my copy in a drawer and shut it. I am learning to live without applause, but sometimes I clap alone. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was finally honest. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.